Hello and welcome to part 2 of my Unity YouTube tutorials, part 2 of my first person shooters tutorial. Today I thought we would try and actually sort of turn what we already made in part 1 into an actual game. Later on I think it will improve the shooting mechanics. So far from part 1 all we have is these projectiles that we're spawning in right where our camera is and shooting them out. It's quite hard to aim where these are going. So the first thing we're going to want to try and do is add a little reticle crosshair to the middle of our screen so we can more easily aim with our shots. But then instead of trying to improve these first-person shooter mechanics, which we can maybe do later, what I'm going to do is create a little timer-based gameplay for sort of a target practice style thing. Just to show you how you can turn a simple mechanic into an actual game, a short arcade game. Arcade games are classic sort of game jam stuff. You can make them really quickly, and it's there's a reason why many of the first simplest games suited that sort of arcade attack score style. So first thing we're going to want to do is add our little reticle, and so we're going to do some UI stuff. That means we're going to have to go ahead and create our canvas, which is going to be right-clicking and going to UI canvas. So this is going to be the start of our UI system. Whenever we press F while hovering over canvas in our hierarchy, we can see our canvas is this big massive thing that sort of overlays in the scene. But really what you should be thinking about is how it overlays on top of your camera as a heads-up display, or otherwise known as a HUD. We're going to want to add something to this. We're going to go ahead and go UI image. We're going to want to add an image to our canvas, and right away you can see this white square has appeared in the center of our screen, and that is the overlaid UI element here. We're going to want to make this little reticle very much smaller. It's currently got a width of 100. You can see the transform of UI elements is a little bit different to the transform that you'll normally see on a game object. So normally you've got your XYZ position, XYZ rotation, and scale. For the UI element, you can see that it's got these other, so it's got XYZ position, but it's also got width and height instead of scale. And it also has anchors and pivot points, and that's so that you can have some more complex hierarchy structures based on resizing your screen. For now, we're going to mount our anchor point to be right in the center, so we can see that set up by default, so we don't have to worry about that. We'll do some more complex UI stuff in the future, and then we're going to just change the width from 100 to something a lot smaller. Let's see what 10 by 10 looks like. Oh, it's almost disappeared in this view, but you can see now we've sort of got a crosshair style object and UI in the center of our screen. Now we can more easily aim where our shot is going to go and hit. All right, that's, we could make that different. We could, one easy change we could make is change our sprite from no sprite. We could change it to a sprite that we import. You can try to work that out yourself, but ultimately for now, we're just going to keep it as it is. We can make it a little circle. That's one of the default sprites that Unity has. For now, I'm happy enough with that little cursor that we've got. Let's go on to the main point of this tutorial, which will be the scoring. Let's zoom back into our scene. Again, the way I'm doing that is selecting one of these objects in the hierarchy and pressing F. That's always a good way of getting back to something that you want to look at. In this case, we want to look at the scene that we actually have instead of the UI. So the first thing we're going to want to do for our little timer is we're going to have a trigger box which will start our timer. So we're going to have to think about where we're going to manage the score and all of this stuff. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new empty object, and this object will just be an object to attach our manager component to. So I can just call this manager, and then we're going to go add component, and we're going to make a new script and add it as an instance of that class to this object, and this will be our score manager. And then this can be the class that takes care of all of our scoring and timer based stuff. So the first thing we're going to do is create a bool, a public bool, and this will be has the timer started. and timer started. And one thing to note about bools is that they default as false. So if I go ahead and save this, you can see that our script will be updated by this bool, and you can see that it defaults as false. Now if we change this in our inspector, it will change the default value. We want the default value to be false because we haven't started the timer yet. So we want to trigger starting the timer and setting that bool to true by a classic trigger box. We've already set up some trigger boxes in this script. Let's make a new one. So I'm going to go ahead and make a 2D object cube to start with. This will be our trigger box where we'll start our score attack adventure. I'm going to put it over here for now. And we're going to go ahead and make sure to turn on is trigger on our box collider because it's going to be a trigger box. And we're going to add our component, which will be, what should we call it, like timer start. So the timer start is going to need to know about our manager. There's a couple of different ways we could do this, but for now we'll keep it simple and we'll make a manager script, a manager class variable here. So it'll be public score manager. We'll just call this manager. And now we have a reference to it. So whenever we on trigger enter, because remember this is the trigger box that we're making here, we can simply say, is the other the player? In this case, we're checking other.tag is equal to player. This is familiar to you from our other on trigger enters that we were doing with checking the tag of the thing we're colliding with. In this case, we want to make sure that we're colliding with the player, and that's causing our score to our timer to start. So in this case, we're going to go timer start dot true. So we're going to do manager dot timer start. So now we're accessing the timer started bool variable of our score manager instance, which is stored in this variable. And then we're going to do is equal to true. So we have now started it. So let's check. First of all, we have to always make sure that we don't forget to actually make these connections. So let's rename this just for sanity. Call it like trigger box start timer. And now I'm going to drag in our manager, which has the script attached to it. So now the manager is stored in the manager variable. I'm going to go ahead and deselect maximize on play just so that I can watch my bool value as I play the game. So whenever I go over to this and enter this box, it's no longer colliding with me, but you can see the timer started has now gone on. All right, so if the timer has started is true, we do actually need an actual timer. So let's go ahead and make our timer. In this case, we're going to keep a track of the time with float. A float, which can be the timer, we'll just call it timer. So now we want this timer to increase in value as time continues. So we're going to go ahead in our update for our score manager. Every frame, we're going to want to set our timer equal to itself plus, the time that's taken place. But another thing we can do that's a lot simpler is we just do plus equals. And plus equals just means that we're adding something to the value that we already have. In this case, it's going to be time dot delta time. There we go. So as the timer, as the time continues, the timer will increase. However, we only want to do this once the timer has started. So let's make an if statement with timer has started is equal to true. And if it's true that the timer has started, then we'll increase our timer over time. And again, we can shorten this and make this simpler because we can truncate this is equal to true by just using the value itself. Because if this returns true, then we'll do it. And if it's false, then we won't. So let's go ahead and test out our script again. So our timer starts at 0. And notice how every time I make a little change, I'm testing the script. You should always do this yourself when you're making your own scripts. Make a little change, test it out, make a little change. We haven't even got close to the functionality yet that we want to see in the final prototype, but we keep on testing because then when something goes wrong, we'll know, oh, it's the next thing. It's the thing we just added that doesn't work, rather than doing it all and then testing it all and then being like, okay, I have no idea what's not working. Okay, so when we enter the box, our timer started sets to true, and then because it's set to true, the if condition will return true, which means now our timer will start to increase. Perfect, so now we've got a timer. However, the player doesn't really know what's going on. We need to tell the player what's going on. So we're going to go ahead and make a new canvas UI element. This time, whenever we create an object, we're going to go UI. We're going to create a text element. We could do a Text Mesh Pro one. It's a bit fancier, but for now, we'll just make text. We'll drag this up to the top. This can be our timer. I think it should be a bit bigger than that. So I'm going to go to the font size and increase this. Here's another tip. I could put in values and keep putting in higher and higher values to see how that works manually. Or I can hover my mouse until you see, if I'm hovering my mouse over where it says font size here, the name of the variable. And in Unity, you can now see these two little arrows on either side of my mouse, and I can drag this left and right to see a slowly incrementing value of our text. The text is, whenever we make the font size too big, it doesn't fit in our box anymore. So I'm going to increase the width using the same sort of procedure, right, where I'm hovering my mouse over where it says width and then dragging left and right. And I'm going to do the same thing with height. Oh, there's our text again. Let's move down the Y position. And then we want our text to be centralized. So we're going to go here to our alignment and centralize our text. It's just like you would in a Word document or something like that. And finally, you know, we'll just set this to 0 because our time is 0. Maybe we want the color to be white. I'm not sure what's higher contrast. I think the white looks like a higher contrast than the black. Yeah, you can see that pretty well actually. So whenever we go in here, the 0 isn't changing because, you know, there's no code to make that happen. So we're going to have to make a change to that. So how is our timer going to know about our UI elements, this 0? Well, we're going to have to create a new variable, and this time it will be a variable for a text. Now, text is part of Unity Engine.ui, which we're currently not using. So one thing we could do is we could go Unity Engine.ui.text. Now we've got a reference to the right type, which is going to be a text type. Or what we can do is we can go here to where we're using our namespaces and do using Unity Engine.ui. And now that means we're importing all of that library into this script. And that's what these are all doing, if you were ever wondering what that stuff was. So now we can just do public text, and it recognizes that that's something that we've imported from Unity Engine.ui. And this will be our timer text. So every frame that we have our timer moving, we're going to want to update our text to the new value timer. Now, the text class actually refers to this entire text component. Here it says text. And confusingly, it has a variable called text, which contains the actual string to be displayed, in this case a 0, that we then need to change. Which means that, confusingly, we actually want to do timer text.text because we're accessing the text variable of this text class. I think Unity should get on to renaming these a little bit less confusingly, to have a text variable inside the text class. You know, you've got the same name. That's a bit confusing, but whatever. Now, it's giving us a problem because we're trying to set a string value, which is the text that's being displayed, with the float. So we're going to have to convert our float into a text, into a string. So we're going to go toString is going to be the method that we add to the end of our float value. So now we can set it to our text. Now, whenever we run the game, our text should hopefully start updating when we move into this box. Oh, I've just realized it won't. In fact, we'll just get this null reference exception error. That's because, as always, we need to set up that connection. So we're going to go ahead and make sure that we save this out. We've got a public text variable we need to set. So it's not going to be on our start, it's going to be on the manager. The manager has none text that we need to set to this text component. And now it will know what we're talking about whenever we tell it to update the string. Hooray! Oof. Now that value is a bit too high on decimal places, right? It's kind of flickering as every single frame it gets updated to a new value. So one thing we can do about that is we can, before we set the string to our text, we can use we can round it up. And we can do that by using a mathf, which is a special class for math based functions. We can use a static function from mathf, which will be rounded to the nearest integer. That sounds good. So we want to contain this entire argument. Now, we don't actually want to use toString on the timer when we're using it for round, because round needs a float argument. You can see there where it says float f. So we want to give it the timer, and then afterwards we want to turn it into a string. So the order you do these things is important. All right, now what happens when we move in? Hopefully it should just increment in integers. Ah, there we go. Lovely. So that looks a bit better. The timer is going up at the moment. Maybe we could make a way for it to count down from a certain value, but for now, I'm happy enough with that timer and how we're representing it. So, what do we do next? The next thing we want to do is incorporate some sort of score. So we've got these enemies that we're shooting and then they disappear. And every time we shoot one of these enemies, maybe we can have a score that is going up. So I'm going to go ahead and duplicate our text, and I'm going to go Control D to duplicate it. I'm going to move this down, and this can be our timer text. The first one could be the timer text. The second one can be our score text. Score text. All right, maybe we'll make the score be a different color. Like a light red. I don't know. You can mess around with this yourself, make something that looks nice. I'm just teaching you how to make things work. I don't want to spend too much time making it look nice. There's lots of things you could do. So we've got our score text and we want our score to go up. So we need to go ahead and grab our manager, score manager. We're going to want to add a public, this time I'll use an int for our score because, you know, we're just going up in whole numbers. So our score is going to go up, and we also want to update the score every time. We'll just do this the lazy way and put it on our update frame. That way it will just update every frame. So we wanted the score of our text, let's see, is going to be set to score.toString. Except it's not the timer text.text we want a different new variable, which is the same as the timer text, but it's instead going to be for the score text. So score text is going to get set to our score. And we can't forget to set up that manager as well. So our score will be dragged in. Boop. Now we haven't actually changed the score in our code, which means we need to go to our enemy. And let's delete all of the other enemies. So we make all the changes to 1, and then we can update that for the others. And our enemy script doesn't actually have our enemy object doesn't actually have a script yet. So we'll actually add our functionality to our projectile because it's the one that's detecting whether there's an enemy and then it's destroying itself. So all we need to do is before it destroys itself, when it hits an enemy, we want it to tell the score manager that the score has gone up. So what we could do here is we can go ahead and create a new variable, public score manager, call it manager. And then whenever we die, whenever the projectile dies and as it hits an enemy, we'll do manager.score is plus equal to 1 because we're making it go up by 1 every time we hit an enemy. Now, there's a problem because the manager script we need to set up in Unity, but the projectile gets spawned in, so we can't tell the projectile about the manager. It won't let us. Like here where it says none score manager, we can't tell it about this manager that's specific to that scene because this projectile could be spawned anywhere. It can't have that dependency. So we're going to have to automatically find the manager, or we could be given the manager. So whenever we go back to our shooter controller and we're instantiating our prefab, what we're going to want to do is, as well as set our new bullet transform, we also want to go ahead and set the new bullet.manager to be equal to something that we can set up as a new variable. So we'll go public Public score manager. Score manager, manager, and then we can set up the reference here, and we can hand it over. Basically, we can give this manager reference to our bullet. All right, there's one more problem. There isn't a manager of the new bullet because the new bullet is a game object. We actually need to get the projectile component that's attached to our new bullet. So we're going to go new bullet dot get component. This is the type, the get component of type projectile. And then we can access the manager of that component to set the manager, which means now the projectile will have the right manager, which means now the manager can go up in score. Now there's one last thing we need to do. We need to make sure that our player object has got a correct reference to the manager, shooter controller. Whenever we save this out, we go to our shooter controller, make sure we save this as shooter controller. And now we've got a reference to none score manager that we can set up with our manager. All right, let's run the game and we can go over. We can start our timer and we can shoot our enemy, which will put up our score. There we go. All right, how do we turn this into a game? Well, we probably want the timer to count down because we've only got so much time to shoot all of the different objects, or perhaps we could just do a high score. Let's just do a high score, that'll be more simple. We could maybe tweak it later. So not only are we going to want to have an object that starts the timer, but we're going to have to want an object that ends the timer. So let's go ahead and do a little bit of level design very quickly. I'm going to drag this, we'll copy this wall over here. So we can create a sort of an area that you have to enter. Just going to do this very quickly. You have to enter this area. We can just make the floor restrict the player so they can't just walk around this wall. There we go. I'm going to have the characters, the enemies, be over here. Oops, let's use the WSD so they don't change in height. So I'm going to duplicate, Control D, some enemies on either side. These are the enemies you have to shoot. You know, you've got to shoot them quickly on either side. And then we've got another set of walls to go through on the other side here. And finally, we're going to have this, extend this area a little bit open. So the idea is you go through this timer, it will start it, it will start the timer, this trigger box. You'll have to shoot these people to get a score of 6. And then you can go through the final door. Let's go ahead and for our duplication of the trigger box start, we're going to change this to end. To end the timer so that we can get our final score. And we're going to get rid of our timer start script and we're going to replace it with a new one which is called timer end. I'm going to go ahead and double click on the timer end now that we've created it so that we can open it in our Visual Studio. And this time, whenever we on trigger enter, we're going to want to do a check. On trigger enter. We're going to want to do a check. So again, we're going to have to get a reference to our manager. So public score manager. We'll have to set that up in Unity, and we're going to do an if check. So if the manager dot score is equal to or greater than, I suppose, but we'll just do equal to. So what is the score? Well, we could hard code this in as being 6, but I don't like hard coding. Hard coding is where I would just say is equal to 6, but instead we're going to create a variable for that. So we're going to call this public int, which is the required score. Required score. It's probably spelled wrong. Maybe it's not. I don't know. Who cares? And then it's equal to our required score. So now we can set this in Unity. And if it's equal to our required score, then we'll end the timer. So we'll do manager. Again, manager dot timer. What was our build called? Let's go back. It was called timer started. So we're going to go timer started is equal to false. And that will end our timer. Finally, we just have to make sure we set up things in Unity correctly. We're going to do our required score. We're going to set that to 6. We're going to grab our manager, drag it in to make sure the reference is set up correctly. And then we're going to run the game and see what score can we get. So when we go through this box, the timer starts. You can see that white number starts to tick up. We've got to shoot each of these people. So our score becomes 6. And then when we go through this box, our timer will end. So we got a score of 10. It took us 10 seconds to get the requisite score. Let's just check that by trying to go through the box without first shooting the enemies. So I can go through this trigger box, and then I can go through here. But because we haven't shot 6 enemies, we've shot no enemies, the timer will not end until we do so. I'm sure you've got a whole bunch of ideas of how you could make this system better, how you could add, more interesting level, for example, of different things to shoot. You could maybe have a little message that appears whenever you end the timer. We could also probably just add very quickly the same if condition here for checking that it's the player that's entering, just in case something else enters our trigger box by mistake that we didn't want, that it's only the player that will end the timer. This has been a little tutorial showing you how to start working on actual gameplay, which is we've got our mechanic, which was shooting that we had already from last tutorial, but then we added timers and score, and then suddenly we've got an objective. We have to shoot 6 enemies. We have a timer, so we have a sense of failure and success. All right, thanks for hanging on with this tutorial. I'm really interested to see maybe if you guys can put together a far more interesting level than this once you have everything working. See you in the next one.